We could turn that into a fourth bedroom or a gym or both. But that house does have some stop the stairs coming out.
Yes, all those stairs look really clean. And temporary with on the ground and big view and first one camera at 4.7. Except for the dramatic right.
Except for more contemporary relocated contemporary, a lot of grass.
And the stairwell, so.
I'm sure it's it's just spectacular house. You can't change the view or the set or there's very few houses like that. There's a lot like that. It's just really expensive and
We still have to make some changes.
make some work. Well, what do you think?
It's not an easy decision.
So I would go with the contemporary, more traditional with the graveyard.
I think that's a great choice. It's in our price range. We assume it's in our price range. We'll see how competitive the bidding is. But I think that's the best choice for us.
Let's go get it. We'll get that.
Okay, great. Nice house.
Well, I've been here about a month, but we'll face those houses. It's even better than we had.
There's a sense of community in this neighborhood that we were lacking in our former neighborhood. That's a big plus in terms of location.
The house is listed for $3.6 million. We ended up paying $3.86 million for 3 or 4 other bidders. It was not a pleasant experience, but we got it. And we're good. I think we have a lot of plans for the future. The doors, the kitchen.
The kitchen is functional. It has nice appliances.
I think it should be.
Alright guys, so what I just did was base coat this guy, or all the flesh areas at least, or all the areas that I'm going to paint red, excuse me, with deep red from scale 75 scale color. I did do it by brush. I was originally planning on doing it with my airbrush, but decided against it. I figured it'd actually be quicker for me to do it by hand than having to do it with airbrush, dilute the paint, clean the airbrush afterwards, so on and so forth. So I did it by hand. I was feeling lazy. This is a rough base coat basically. I'm going to be putting plenty of layers over this, both highlights and shadows, a lot of glazing. Essentially the plan moving forward on this is to start highlighting with mixes of deep red and blood red. I'll probably start at about 75% deep red and 25% blood red. Add a couple of drops of my glaze medium and go to town on it. I do plan on taking my time with this guy. This is a big model that if painted nicely looks really impressive. So I'm going to take my time with the highlights and the blends and just to make sure it actually comes out looking really neat. I don't know moving forward how much of it I'll actually get on video. I don't want to make it too long. At the same time, I want to make it as informative as possible, obviously. So I guess we'll just watch and see and go from there type deal. What I will do, the first couple of layers on here, I still have some of the red paint in my wet palette over here. That's still workable, so that's the deep red that I used for the base coat. So I'm just going to start adding my blood red in there, straight in there basically, along with my glaze medium. As always, make sure you shake your paints up really well, especially if you're using the scale 75 paints. And my paper's ripping, tearing over here, so I might actually go off to the side. I didn't change my paper from the last time I painted some skin on here. I don't remember what this is from yet. Actually, I think it might be Artemis. Anyways, one thing I can show you guys is actually how much I dilute the paint and how I mix it and so on and so forth. So that's deep red. I'm going to add a drop of blood red and a couple of drops of glaze medium, which is going to make the paint very opaque. It is what I am going for. It's to make sure I get really nice transitions with the blends. Also going to add a couple of drops of water here with my paintbrush. It should be enough. Stir mix it up really well. And go to town. The consistency, hopefully you guys can tell on here. It's not milky. You know, a lot of people, a lot of times I said it myself too, is, you know, it has to be the consistency of milk. This isn't necessarily the consistency of milk, but it's nice and thin. It's thin to the point where I'll get nice transitions. What I like to do too is, while painting, I'll load up my brush with whatever paint, and then I have a moist paper towel over here that I can just dab any excess paint off on, to make life easier on myself and to make sure I don't overload whatever model I'm painting at the time. So, and I also don't know how easy this is going to be to keep in focus as I work on it, but I will do my best. So basically I'm just going to go in there and start adding color. Now these first few layers, and this is going to be, you know, at least 3 or 4 layers of each highlight here. First couple are going to go over a majority of the raised portions, obviously, like this. Not really worried about being too neat just yet, because there's going to be a lot of glazing as far as shadows and everything else go over here, so I will have opportunity to go in and fix this if need be, if I go in too far or with the highlights or anything like that. So I'm not too worried about being too neat. I'm just kind of gonna start building this up. I'm not going to record all of this. It's absolutely, if I recorded the skin from start to finish, you'd probably be watching 4 hours of footage after I go ahead and edit it. So I'm just trying to give you guys an idea of how I'm going to do this. And what I will do with this now is bring it up to the midtones, bring up the highlights to the midpoint before I really start going in there with some brighter highlights, and I will show you guys where I'm at then. Essentially to make this easier, I'm going to go right now, I'm going to put down at least 3 coats of this mix that you just saw, and then I'll start adding a little bit more blood red in there afterwards, but I'll come back to you guys after I'm comfortable with just putting down this first layer to show you what it looks like, and then start moving from there into the other transitions. Alright guys, so you probably can't see much of a difference on here, and I wouldn't blame you, because there really isn't. What I ended up doing here is, for the most part, just blocking in the big red areas, you know, like the muscles or the muscle definition, so on and so forth, the feathers on here, muscles on the legs, so on and so forth. I was not very neat with this, however, because again, there's going to be a lot of glazes, a lot of washes, and a lot of other layers going over this. Before I start putting on the actual highlights, I'm going to try and explain how I will go about doing it. First thing to remember is, especially when you're painting something that's as well defined as muscles, you kind of want to go with the definition here. So my brush strokes are always going to follow the definition of the muscles here. Number 2, what I will be using for this is, again, a mix of deep red and blood red, this time about 50-50, with 1 drop of glaze medium in there. I will show you guys, let me start mixing up the paint. I will show you guys the process just for a little bit, for a few minutes, and then I will proceed to finish it off camera, obviously, just because it's so much easier for me. It goes so much faster as well. I did put on a glove on my left hand because this figure is not very comfortable to hold. There wasn't a single piece of it that I could hold without touching stuff that's already being painted. I didn't want to get any oil on there or anything off my hands, any crud off my hands, so I did put on a glove for easier handling. That's about what I will be doing as far as the 50-50 mix goes here with some glazed medium. Now, I don't know whether I'll be bringing this up all the way to blood red, or whether I'll go a different route just yet. If any of you have been watching or have watched any of my other videos, probably starting to figure out by now that I don't really go into these things with a plan in my head. I just kind of go along and see how the project develops and go from there. I was originally actually planning on doing his skin a bit more of a purple tone to it, but I decided against it. Just because I felt more comfortable painting a redder tone than anything else. So this is where I'm going to start adding in definition in here. And again, there's going to be a couple of layers of each of these highlights. And again, I'm not going to be super duper neat because these are all highlights prior to any glazes going down, so I will be then able to come back with my glazes afterwards, soften them up, and then in the end go in with the final highlights and really be able to be a little neater about it. But the glazes will definitely smooth it out as well when they go on afterwards. Right now, as you can see, I'm still kind of going over the entire surfaces just to build in more definition in here. This does have glaze medium on it, so it will not cover completely, so it won't be that stark. But again, even if I do get it more stark than I'd like it to be, you know, more saturated than I'd like it to be, and then of course I will go in with the glazes afterwards and fix it. This red that I just put down, not the first highlight that's going down now, but the actual red that I was just working on, the 75-25 mix there. That's basically my mid-tone, or what I'd like to think of as my mid-tone, meaning from there, it's a good base to start. From there I start with the highlights, and I'll also go with the shadows, and I'll deepen it with shadows later on. Now don't see, for instance, like the muscle back here, only going to fill it in a little bit because all this area back here is going to be shaded and is going to be darker, so there's really no point of me wasting time going in there with too many highlights because, well, that'll all disappear once I go in there with the glazes for the shadows. Now, the reason I chose to paint this figure, actually, to buy this figure and paint this figure, is number one, with the new edition of 40K coming out this weekend. I was actually thinking about getting back into wargaming, since I haven't really played any war games since high school, which was years and years and eons ago, going on 12 years now. Did not have any time in college to play war games, so I stopped playing in high school, essentially. Anyways, so I was thinking about getting back into wargaming, and my initial choice would have been fantasy, but after I picked up the Age of Sigmar starter box, I realized what a complete turd it is, so I'm not going to bother now. The rules themselves are actually quite good from everything that I read, but the world, it's just not for me. I love the Warhammer world, and I was actually kind of heartbroken when GW went in and destroyed it and replaced it with Sigmar, and it just, I can't. It's just, I guess it's over my head. It's too weird. Granted, 40k isn't any less weird. That said, 40k, I guess, is something I'm used to. As far as the world goes, as far as the lore goes, so I'm more accepting of it, I guess. So anyways, the reason I picked this up was, number one, again, I'm thinking about getting back into gaming, and I love the Thousand Suns, just the look of them. And since I already had the squad of Rubric Marines in the works, I said, you know what, why not? Let me get the Magnus and go from there. Second reason is I'm actually looking, try and bring my painting up kind of to the next level. You know, I spend a lot of time on Cool Mini or Not. I spend a lot of time on Putty and Paint. Not that I post anything on Putty and Paint, but I spend a lot of time just looking at other people's work. Figure Mentor is another one. Just some of the amazing artwork that you see that people, you know, put out for these figures. Said to myself, you know what, let me challenge myself a little bit with something bigger, something that gives me the opportunity to actually put in a lot of work and a lot of effort into it. So this was it. This was the Magnus. Plus, I actually kind of like the figure. It is a little bit quirky. It does have its quirks, as you guys heard me talk about in the unboxing and the build review. But overall, it's actually a pretty cool figure. Love the muscle definition. I like painting skin, so this was another good choice for that. But anyways, I'm going to stop rambling and I'm going to continue filling this in, and I'll come back to you guys when it's done. Alright guys, so I got the red midtones down on this. Took a little bit longer than I thought, obviously, just because it's a much bigger figure. Hopefully you can see kind of a building up difference between the base coat and the midtones here. I did work up maybe about 1/3 of the way up on the wings. Not sure what I'm going to do with the wings yet, but I'll figure it out as I go. Now what I'm going to do is slowly start applying the shadows, start glazing in the shadows. So what I'm going to do is do a 50-50 mix of violet and black. Violet obviously from Scale Color and black from Vallejo. Doesn't really matter if you want to use, you know, one or the other. Just, yeah. I had black underhand from Vallejo, that's why I'm using it, so I didn't pull off the Scale Color one. But here, I'm going to zoom you guys in a little bit so you can see the consistency I'm going for and the mix. That should be enough. And obviously my glaze medium here as well. A couple of dots of that, and a couple of drops. And now mix it all in with water. Quite a bit of water actually in this. This mix is probably going to be something like 1 part paint, or 1 part black, 1 part purple, 2 parts glaze medium, and as much as 10 parts of water. I just have to mix it all up and see how it behaves, and then add as needed, basically. Basically going for a dark purple, obviously, and then I'll go back in with just black as well, of the same consistency, little by little. That looks good. Now, how I approach this is, obviously, you're gonna dip your brush in the glaze here, and then I wipe off most of the paint on my my wet paper towel there. Turn this over just to show you guys a little bit. Now this is going to take time. I'm probably going to end up using at least 10 to 20 layers of this between the purple and the black itself. Kind of work my way around the muscle structure here into all the deep recesses here. Don't worry if you get some on the muscles. Obviously, it's only the mid-tone that's, or on the race surfaces, it's only the mid-tone that's down right now, so it's not a big deal. But anyways, I'm going to keep working this in like this, and I'll come back to you guys when I'm satisfied with what it looks like to show you. Alright guys, I got the shadows as far in as I will take them for the time being at least. Basically use the mixture of the purple and then some flat black as well. I will take them further or deeper as I fill in the start filling in the highlights next, but for the time being I'm happy with how they look. Next up is going to be glazing in the highlights. So what I will be doing is using a mixture of about 25% blood red to 75% Antares red. And again, you know, about 5 parts water to 1 part paint, and another 1 part glaze medium in there, and then I'll just start brushing in the highlights basically on the raised surfaces. Take my time. This is probably going to be quite a few layers, and I'll come back with you guys. I'll come back to you guys afterwards to show you the results. Alright guys, the skin is done. Hopefully you can see it here. I moved it downstairs to my photo area so you guys can get a better look at it. All in all, I actually had good time painting this. It was quite fun. I love the muscle definition. It's really nice muscle definition, especially in the chest area here, the arms, obviously the forearms. Everything else with the wings here, I think I'm going to start going in with purple and blues and greens maybe. I haven't decided yet, but that's why I only did the wings as far as I did. Now the paints I used, obviously throughout the video I talked about them too, but I'll give you guys a better idea. The base coat was deep red, followed by a 50-50 mix of deep red and blood red, which was my mid-tone. Then I started adding in some Antares red for the highlights. Finally, some pale skin for the two highest or two brightest highlights. For the shadows, I used violet along with 50-50 mix of black, and then some pure black glazes in the deepest shadows. The shadows were glazed on. Other than that, yeah, I'm actually quite happy with how it came out. This was probably 6 hours of work, 8 hours of work, somewhere around there in total. I'm getting really happy with how it came out. Next, I'm obviously going to start working on the feathers. I actually might do all the NNM, or all the metallic sections next, the armor, the weapons, so on and so forth. Anyways, that'll come in part 2. I figured I'll split this down into parts given how long the painting the red video was, or is going to be, I guess. Yeah, I'll divvy it up into parts and go from there. So thank you for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. And coming up in part 2 is going to be, I think I'm going to work on the horns and on the metallic portions. Thanks, guys.